Dear friends, welcome to the War Heroes channel. Today, we are talking about penal battalions and companies of the Red Army. To understand this issue, we turn to the memoirs of a Soviet veteran who served in a penal company. This is the third part of the video. First part you will find in the description under this video. Yefim Abelovich Holbright served as deputy commander of the 163rd Penal Company of the 51st Army. The veteran's memories are especially valuable, since he was the son of an enemy of the people. His father was shot in 1937. This is a very detailed interview that covers all the most important and interesting details of the existence of these units. So let's start. Can you say NOITANABLU the NKVD forces and ABLUTORV or no? 227. It is not necessary to demonize those who served in special departments. Recently, in any movie about the war, the special officers are shown as sadists, wandering with a revolver in the rear and looking for a soldier's back of the head to shoot. We just need to understand that some of the Army counterintelligence officers fought with their people and they are criminals, but most performed their duty in accordance with the guidelines of that difficult time. You can't understand it now. At the front in the summer of 1942, the remnants of the regiment were taken to the rear, lined up. The NKVD officer brought a soldier to the middle under the protection of two fighters. Read out the verdict. The soldier was found guilty of shooting himself. I remember only one phrase from the speech of the special officer. It is better to die from a German bullet than from your own. This soldier was shot. I will tell you another tragic incident that happened before my eyes. You know about Stalin's Order No. 227. The text is familiar to you. It is pointless to argue now whether the order was good or bad. At that moment, necessary. The situation was critical and faith in victory was at its limit. The commander of the mortar company in our regiment was 22-year-old Alexander Obada. He was a career officer and managed to graduate from a military school before the war. He knew the business well. He tried to save soldiers and they loved him. And as the commander, he was brave. I was friends with him. Sasha led the company to the front, trying not to lose people. There were a lot of older soldiers in the company. It was difficult for them to walk in the heat with heavy 82mm mortars on the ridge. They had to rest often. The company was a day behind the regiment. But war does not regret and does not forgive. That day we attacked the Germans several times and did not advance a single step. I was on the phone when the division commander called. He handed the phone to the regimental commander. "Why aren't you advancing?" the division commander asked. Regiment commander began to explain something. "Have you shot anyone?" The regiment commander immediately understood everything and after a pause said, "No." "So shoot them," said the commander. "This is not a party or meeting. This is war." In the evening, when it got dark, the battalion and company commanders and political officers were called to the regiment commander's command post. The deputy commander began to make a roll call. I just came back from the front edge. The foreman put a pot with some cold brew in my hands, and I finished it sitting on the ground. Excited voices could be heard from the command post. After the concussion, I heard poorly. I could hardly make out the words. Sasha Albadov started walking backwards up the steps from the command post trench. Next, advancing on him and inflaming themselves with anger, the commissar of the regiment, the senior battalion commissar Fedorenko, appeared with pistols in their hands. Let me clarify, this was even before the introduction of unity of command in the army. Then the commissar and the commander of the regiment had equal rights. The commander had the signature and the commissar had the seal. "Comrade Commissar," Sasha repeated in despair, still not believing in what was happening. "Comrade Commissar, I've always been a good person." Shots rang out. Shielding himself with his hands, Sasha waved away the bullets as if they were flies. "Comrade Commissar, comrade," after the third bullet hit him. Sasha fell silent in mid-sentence and collapsed to the ground. He was always a good person. He was only 22 years old. The Germans continuously illuminated the front edge with rockets and spread a multicolored fan of tracer bullets low over our heads. From time to time, mines hooted deeply. Nothing has changed. The war continued. In GNDRL, SATNCSARI, to voice all the bitter and hard truth about the war now? I don't even know what else to tell you so that you understand how terrible war can be. How many people have already passed away without telling people what they had to experience, without telling their truth of the war? And how many are still alive, but they are silent, thinking that no one needs it anymore? My comrade Alexei Dudnev, the commander of a machine gun platoon, wounded in the head. A bullet hit under the left eye and went out in the back of the head. Crawled out of the encirclement, crawling across the battlefield, around the dead of their own and others. A rare chain of people appeared on the horizon. They walked to the front line, bent down from time to time. Orderlies, he thought, and crawled towards them. A pistol shot came to the ear. He didn't pay attention. There were 2 more dry pops. Look closely. People were in our uniform. And then he realized, looters. They shoot the wounded and rob the dead, stay alive after a fatal injury and die in such a way. They'll shoot him, he thought bitterly, but he kept crawling. We met. With difficulty turning his head, he asked, "Guys, let me pass," and they leave him. Either they took pity on his youth or the machine gun, which he could not use anyway, made an impression, but they leave him alone. Not believing yet in his second rescue, he crawled on, and by morning he crawled to the medical unit. The medical battalion was of another division and he was not accepted. The frontline soldiers know that during the offensive, medical units as a rule accepted the wounded only from their division and very reluctantly from other formations. There is such a flow of wounded there that they did not have time to process them. It was terribly insulting and seemed insane. Now you can be indignant as much as you want, but it happened quite often. They gave Alexei a piece of bread. He couldn't eat. His mouth almost wouldn't open. He pinched off small pieces, pushed them through his teeth and sucked, and crawled on. He rested and crawled again. So he crawled to the hospital, where they took him and bandaged. On the 5th day after the injury, and this is not fiction, a soldier of our battalion, I won't mention his last name, he went through the war and may still be alive. He was 19 years old at the time. It so happened that the battalion was liberating his native village, which was taken without a fight. His house was on the outskirts. By the time he got home, the neighbors told him that his mother had slept with the Germans and his fiancée was also involved in this dirt. The soldier shook all over. He went into the house and shot his mother. He wanted to shoot his girlfriend, but he didn't have time. The battalion commander came into the house in time and didn't allow him to kill her. How to make sense of it all now? Every personal tragedy? You have passed part of your front-line path as a political worker of the COMPANLY and battalion EVL. Now only a lazy person will note that ROAS tone at the COMISRs. What did it mean for you to be a communist and a political officer at the front? I am not ashamed of my membership in the party. I was not a party functionary and did not enjoy any benefits. I joined the party at Stalingrad. At night, the commissar and the party manager of the regiment crawled up to my trench. They gave me recommendations. There was no meeting. The political photographer sat at the opposite wall of the trench until dawn. He could make a flash. It would be the last flash in his life, and in mine too. He pressed the trigger of this photo camera and quickly crawled away only when morning came. But I got the privilege right away. The commissar called me and said, "You're a communist now. There will be a green rocket. You will jump up first. For the motherland, for Stalin. And go ahead." Personal example. The phrase personal example was one of the boss's favorites. It's easy to say, I didn't want to jump up. Not the first. Not the last one. It was after the war that there were many willing, and then for some reason, there were many times fewer of them. Alexander Misurov has a poem, Communists. Go ahead. So it was, and jumped up. It's like there's a spring inside, and ran to attack, and shouted, probably swearing. No one heard it anyway, and me too. But before the attack, the call for the motherland, for Stalin, sounded not only in the speeches of political workers. The commanders also said this call to their fighters. And there were enough scoundrels among political workers and among ordinary commanders. But for the most part, they were patriots who did not spare their lives in the name of victory. You mentioned MEZAIRV. He also has a famous poem, "We are standing in a Korawildi under KOLPIN. The artillery is hitting its own. Has this ever happened to you?" Of course, sometimes our stormtroopers and gunners treated us, but more often they hit the Germans. As a rule, we received from our own comrades only in the offensive if we did not have time to report on our progress in time. I was hit by a volley of Katyushas once. It's hard to convey my feelings at those moments. Every confrere will tell you about such cases. Everything happens in war. Shall we touch on the little air topic? In 1942, a soldier of our regiment was awarded the Medal for Bravery. The whole regiment was gathered for a meeting on the occasion of his award. They began to reward generously only after 1944, and not always on military merit, and it did not depend on us at all whether they would give an order or a medal. They sent a reward list, and it would disappear somewhere. There has never been any justice in this regard. I have seen soldiers after 6 wounds with a single medal on their chest. You come to the headquarters, and there are a lot of officers with medals on the jackets. I came to the penal company with 2 orders of the Red Star, and for the last frontline year I received the Order of the Patriotic War. Although in the penalty company it was possible to give an order for each attack fairly and calmly. I did not chase awards and did not beg from my superiors. Only once, in 1943, I asked the commander what he heard about the Order of the Red Banner, to which I was presented, and in response I heard something like, "There won't be enough noble medal for all of you in the country soon." Well, for him, of course, it was enough. I didn't lick the boss's ass in boots. There was a clerk at the headquarters, a certain Pisarenko, full compliance with the position and surname. So he destroyed the award list. He did not like my surname. Then he wrote me a letter to the hospital. Repented. He died stupidly at the end of the war. And what was given or what was not given, what difference does it make now? Jews were very often restricted in awards. In addition to my examples, I know many dozens of similar cases. In the infantry, unlike tank or artillery units, anti-Semitism was flourished. Don't forget one more important detail. I was the son of an enemy of the people. It was indicated in the personal officer's file. For example, Grigory Polshinyan, who was twice presented to the title of hero and did not receive this title, had a red pencil written on his personal file. Mother is Jewish, father is an enemy of the people. Then such an annotation did not sound funny at all. Taking to the frontline soldiers, IASK HAT was the most difficult thing in the war. Many answer front roads. Describe an infantry soldier on the MARC. An infantry soldier has everything hung on him, just like that donkey. The other, who did not come out tall, is not visible because of the loaded equipment, and a roll, and a duffel bag, and a gas mask, damn it, and a helmet, and a sapper shovel, and a baller hat, and a field bag, and 3 or 4 pouches with cartridges. You can stuff grenades into a gas mask bag. Well, a rifle or a submachine gun. Sweat pours in streams. Dust of frontline roads. In the liberated villages, we were treated to seeds. The Germans called them Russian chocolate. The seeds helped to pass the time. When seeds in the overcoat pocket over 10 kilometers passed, that was the soldier's speedometer. Crossing 80 kilometers is remembered as a nightmare. We slept on the move. Yes, they will hang 482mm mines around their necks. It is not recommended to fall with the mine, especially the second time. From the blow, the mine could get into a combat position. You walk. Your whole body itches wildly from sweat and lice. Your stomach sticks to your back from hunger. And so we reach victory. Do you remember your last battle or the last frontline day? I can't call it a fight, but how I met the last day of the war, I'll tell you now. Courland. They have already reported that Berlin has been taken. We took a high rise. We are preparing for an attack. The sappers made passages in the minefields in front of us. Opposite are German pillboxes and 4 tanks dug into the ground. The Germans are 300 meters away. The day is not promised to be pleasant. We look. White flags wobble over the German trenches and disappear. Everyone in frustration. Suddenly, the white flag rose firmly above the parapet. Just in case, we canceled the artillery preparation. No one goes to our trenches. Apparently, they are afraid of getting a bullet in the back from their own. Everyone is looking at me. I was the only one in the company who knew German, and sometimes I had to interrogate Germans. The fighter standing next to me says, "Yes, if something happens, we will leave a wet spot from them. Only I won't see that wet spot if Germans shoot me." I stand definitely on the parapet, take off the belt with the pistol, put the machine gun on the ground. I take out a handkerchief, the color vaguely resembling white, and on stiff legs I walk towards the enemy along the cleared path. Silence. The front froze. Suddenly there are footsteps behind. One of our penalty soldiers, a young and healthy guy, caught up with me. We went on together and reached the German defense. We went down to the Germans in the trench, and they are shouting, throwing themselves at us. Half of them are with SS badges. We were stuck in such a strange situation. My soldier is nervous, sweat is pouring off him, and I too am holding a grenade in my pocket. And I think to myself, if it's necessary to die so stupidly on the last day. The Germans speak fast. I can't make out the words from excitement. Led to the commander, and I have a stupor except for Stalin, Gut, Hitler, Kaplan. I can't say anything clearly. With difficulty I master myself, and in a commanding voice I declared, "We guarantee life, food, surrender. Go out in a column through a passage in a minefield. Follow the formation to our location," etc. Commander just nodded, realized that I am a Jew, and did not demean himself before talking to me. "Let's go back. I've been waiting all these meters for a shot in the back." But they didn't shoot. When the Germans went to surrender, the fighters shouted "Hurrah!" and hugged. Everyone understood that the war was over for us, and we remained alive. The Germans were disarmed, freed from the watch, and sent further to the rear. On the occasion of the end of the war, the entire personnel of our company was amnestied. Did you drink ALOT at the front? Were the penalty soldiers supposed to have 100 grams of vodka? As well as the entire personnel of the frontline units. In winter, as well as on the offensive, regardless of the time of year. I didn't drink much at the front. A bottle of vodka was divided by a matchbox placed end to end. 5 boxes. The bottle is divided. The fighters often got moonshine. It used to happen that they would drink wood alcohol unknowingly and die in terrible agony. A lot of people died in the war on a drunken case. The Germans knew our psychology and often, leaving the defensive lines in some locality, left an untouched tank of alcohol on the railway tracks. And after a couple of hours, they beat off this point again. We already had no one to fight. Everyone was drunk. Wild incident occurred at the Popelnia station in East Prussia. They took the station, and there was a tank of alcohol. They began to celebrate the combat success. A few hours later, an echelon of German tanks arrived at the station, calmly unloaded and knocked us out of there. Or another story, our T-34 tanks were without crews. The tankers drink too much, and there were enough drunken commanders who decided to act heroically at someone else's expense. I know this not from Simonov's book. One day the bosses themselves drove me to storm the high rise. It was impossible to take this height by the regiment, but they drove my only company. As usual, with promises. If you don't take the height, we'll shoot you. I also saw how a drunken general shot the commander of the battery for daring to object, having received a stupid, disastrous order. My battalion commander, Ivashchuk, also died, being drunk. He rode out on a white horse to the forefront and began to cover the Germans with bad words. The Germans threw a couple of mines and Ivashchuk was easily wounded. If he would have been sober, maybe turned around and galloped off to the rear, but he continued to shout something to the Germans, threatening them with his fist in the direction of their trenches. The next mine hit him. Ridiculous death. After all the experiences on the frontline, have you ever wanted to finish the war in the second echelon? After the hospital, I served in a communications battalion for a couple of months. I was taking a break from the war, so to speak. But even their people died. No one knows their fate. Somehow we were walking across the field with the commander of the communications company. We have coils with wire for 400 meters. A German dive bomber appeared in the sky and began to hunt us. Just 2 men in uniform. We ran to the trenches. I fell behind. and the senior lieutenant managed to run and jump into the trench. I think that's it. Game over. 20 meters to the trench remained, and in that place, there was a bomb with a direct hit. That's what service in the second echelon is like. My comrade Heinrich Skursky, the commander of the radio company, a tall, broad-shouldered, handsome man, a favorite of the regiment, died from one accidental mine, being a kilometer from the front line. The deaths of Sasha Koslichko and Henryk Skursky are for me the most bitter losses in the war. In the autumn of 1942, when a difficult situation developed in the center of Stalingrad, our division was transferred northwest of the city in order to pull back part of the enemy forces. We went to the front line to engage in battle on the move. We passed along a huge beam in which thousands of people were digging cracks and burrowing into the ground. Headquarters, medical posts, gunners. The gentle slopes of the beam were completely pitted with cracks, near which soldiers were swarming, strengthening, and adjusting something. Some sat and enjoyed smoking hand, rolled cigarettes of various sizes. It was a warm day. That's how many people in the second echelon. And on the front line, 1, 2, and enough. A few hours later, when we returned from the battle with the remnants of the battalion, this place was unrecognizable. The war went through it, yes, apparently, more than once. Most likely, German dive bombers work here. Everything is pitted, mangled. Not one, there is no surviving gap. Not a single trench. The narrow road in the middle of the beam is littered with broken equipment, overturned, broken carts. Overturned kitchens with soldiers' soup were still smoking. And corpses. They haven't been removed yet. The survivors, half deaf, not yet recovered from the air raid. The soldiers bandaged their comrades and shot the crippled horses. Depressed by what we saw, we struggled along the beam, carefully stepping over the corpses of people and horses, as if they could still be damaged. I walked and thought, that's how many people have been beaten. So much for the second echelon. No, it's better on the front line. Why do people of your generation? Although it sounds strange, the war years the best time of their lives. For many people of my generation, the war was the best time of our lives. War, with its incredible inhuman heaviness, with its test of rupture and fracture, with its extreme strain of physical and moral strength, and yet war. And it's not just a longing for a bygone youth. In the war, we could not be replaced, and there was no one. The feeling of belonging to great, tragic, and heroic events was the pride of our life. I knew I was needed. Here, now, at this moment, and no one else. That's it for today, the end of the interview. If you liked the video, then support it with a like and the channel with a subscription. Bye, everyone. See you again.